And we're live. Welcome to LOOPCast. It is Friday, the last day of February. We are joined today by the inimitable Rachel Bovard, Vice President of Programs at the Conservative Partnership Institute. She has been on LOOPCast before, and she was so great we had to have you back. So, Rachel, thanks for joining us.
Happy to be here. I'm sure it's just because you're desperate, but I'm happy to be back.
Oh, come on. Yeah, I don't think so.
No, Two things can be true at the same time.
This is true. We can be desperate and you're awesome. I mean, hello. So, yeah, Rachel's very active on the Hill, and I can't wait to sort of get the inside scoop on what life has been like since January 20th for anyone who's working to get people confirmed in the Trump administration. But we're on the road today. So I am in the podunk northern regions of New Hampshire, live free or die, and Mercer is in the belly of the swamp in D.C. So you were at the National Catholic Prayer Breakfast this morning. Josh, tell us what it was like, rubbing shoulders with the VP.
I mean, the most exciting thing was waking up at 5 a.m. because, I mean, the thing is...
It's always so early.
It is always so early.
But then when breakfast, guys.
Yes, I know. My daughter came with me and she's like, couldn't we make it brunch instead? You know, started it not so early. But anytime you have a big wig like J.D. Vance is coming this time, and I've been to many prayer breakfasts before. We had Vice President Pence one time, and George W. Bush, President George W. Bush came, and so Secret Service gets involved, and so it's just a super long line for security. But they did a really good job getting people through there, and it was nice to meet a lot of people. Peter Wolfgang has been on the program before. We were in line together.
Shout out, Peter.
Yeah, we were having a lot of fun, and I mean, I should give a shout out to some of our listeners, because every time I feel kind of, I don't know, they saw the Catholic Vote label. I had lapel on my pin, and they're like, "Oh, I love Catholic Vote. I love the LOOPCast." And so I want to give a shout out to Joyce Morris, who came all the way from Orange, Texas, to come to the prayer breakfast, and she was just having a lot of fun. So it was fun, and we obviously the big speech was by Vice President J.D. Vance, and I got to tell you, he was very presidential, or vice presidential, if you will, and just very magnanimous, I think, because, of course, there's a lot of people in the church who have been attacking him for his positions, especially on immigration, and the document that the Holy Father put out that kind of, it's like subtweeting the vice president. Didn't mention him by name, but it's pretty clear that he had at least somebody who presented this, the Holy Father, had J.D. Vance in mind. And so he just took, I think, a more elevated view of everything. He said, "Look, I'm not going to get everything right. I'm a baby Catholic, I'm a convert to the faith," he said, "and I'm going to try my best to understand what's going on with the church." But he also, he mentioned that we're talking about a 2,000-year-old institution in the Catholic Church, and social media is about 10 some years old. And so we shouldn't, every time a bishop or a priest or the Pope says something and it gets onto social media, people are going to try to use those words and to get people into internet, like Catholic civil wars or whatever. And he said, we just really need to make sure we're not hanging on to every last word and using that as a way to divide us, and just kind of allow things to take their course. Because in social media, of course, there's that instant reaction. Someone says something and someone says something else, and then it becomes the reaction of the reaction. And I just think he was wise to say we should maybe take a beat every once in a while and let things play out. Are you about to put up the clip there? There's the one funny clip. Did you have that one?
Yeah, I loved. So yeah, Tom Pegasic just had our beloved Pogo, shout out Pogo. My favorite quote so far, quote, J.D. Vance, "I try not to get involved in the civil wars between Dominicans and Jesuits, conservative Catholics and progressive Catholics. But as Michael Corleone once said in The Godfather, sometimes they pull me back in." And he's got the hands there, like the little Italian mafia hands. That's so real. They pull me back in. And I mean, I was watching some of the breakfasts live, and like you said, magnanimous is a good word for it. And he's taken a lot of flack. He made a couple of comments about converts and hillbillies, and it was in good faith, and it just really impressive speech.
One of the things I think he did good, though, to kind of counter with that stuff, was just talking about how President Donald Trump in his first term, and then now as he's in his second term, is emphasizing peace. And he said, I actually kind of feel guilty about how our country and a lot of our foreign escapades have displaced a lot of people. And a lot of times those are actually Christians. And he gave a shout out to Carl Anderson, the former Supreme Knight for the Knights of Columbus, and also Chris Smith, who won the award from the Prayer Breakfast this year. Just saying, you guys have worked tirelessly on behalf of displaced Christians, Chaldean Christians, Christians in Syria.
Yeah.
And, J.D. Vance says that as someone who spent time, in the war in Iraq as a Marine. So I thought he was right to emphasize that as something that, when you talk about the Catholic view of things and just war theory, that's something that progressive Catholics don't give enough credit to Donald Trump for. He's the one that has moved the GOP away from the George W. Bush neocon foreign interventionism. And I think liberal Catholics should thank Trump for that.
Yeah, absolutely. Rachel, I'm going to come over to you to kind of get a sense of how life has changed since the inauguration on the Hill. But first, I do have to mention we have a sponsor of this episode, Hypuro Fit. Are you tired of the secular approach to fitness and nutrition? Discover HypuroFit.org, the world's first Catholic personal training and nutrition coaching company, inspired by the teachings of St. Pope John Paul II. I'm a big fan. HypuroFit teaches that exercise and nutrition can be tools to help you strive for self-mastery, for self-gift. And of course, Lent is coming up. So if you've considered, what am I going to do for Lent? Maybe check out Hypuro Fit as part of your Lenten journey. They offer a range of services to meet individual needs, including one-on-one online personal training and nutrition coaching, subscription-based exercise programs, single purchase exercise programs, and more. Their certified trainers and nutrition experts provide personalized plans that honor one's faith, helping individuals grow stronger in body, mind, and spirit. Technically excellent and authentically Catholic, Hypuro Fit ensures the highest quality guidance while staying true to the Catholic faith and its values. So visit HypuroFit.org today. We will drop that in the chat and start your journey of wellness through the lens of faith. Hypuro Fit. Discover the Catholic approach to fitness. That's actually, thinking about Lent coming up next week. This year with Lent, I kind of felt like it was so late that I felt like we would just get off the hook and not do it this year. So when our priest mentioned this last week, he was like, oh, and Lent's coming up. I'm like, wait, no, I thought it was over this year. But
oh, so apparently Erica gave up Lent for Lent.
I'm giving up Lent for Lent, yeah. Anyway, so Rachel, last time we had you on the show, we knew Trump was coming in. We won the election was won, but he was not yet in. What has life been like in DC for you since January 20th?
It's been crazy, but in a good way. I think, there's so much that goes on in DC around a transition to a new administration. And then obviously post inauguration, the official transition happens. But even leading up to that point is incredibly busy because there's a whole transition architecture that evolves to, move the old president out and the new president in. And all of that is staffed by volunteers pretty much. So, or as I like to say.
Wow, I did not know that.
Yeah. So I am a volunteer. So the transition is still ongoing in some respects, even though the inauguration has happened, just because there's a little bit of continuity that has to happen as things are officially getting kicked off. But yes, I am a transition volunteer, although as I like to say, I was voluntold. So I was, or more like renditioned into this process. But
drafted.
Yeah, basically. So there's a lot of things that happen in the transition, but one of them is as soon as the president, obviously, as soon as he's elected, he starts nominating his cabinet, and he puts a lot of nominations in place all the way from the cabinet down to the sub cabinet. And how those people get confirmed, that process starts even before the president is sworn in. And so in this case, how it works is every cabinet nominee is assigned a team of Sherpas. And that's a hilarious word, but it is actually.
I love that word.
Yeah. So it's funny. The sub cabinet nominees are like, am I supposed to call you a Sherpa? Is that? I'm like, no, the senators know. Like the senators aren't put off by this at all. They're like, this is my Sherpa. And the senators are like, yeah, it's a Sherpa, it's fine. But it's basically they bring in people who have a lot of Senate experience or Hill experience, and their job and my job right now is to get these nominees through the confirmation process. And it's not simply nomination, question mark, confirmation. There's a lot of stuff that happens in between, and the Sherpas are responsible for that. So we take all of the nominees through their Senate meetings. So the nominee at the cabinet level, they tend to meet with as many senators as want to meet with them.
Right.
At the sub-cabinet level, they'll usually just meet with the senators on the relevant committees that are going to be voting on their nomination. But it's prep for a lot of those meetings. And with meeting with any other senator that's interested, you're preparing. Each committee has a ton of its own diligence that they do on these nominees. So there's a lot of paperwork, as you might imagine, involved in assessing conflicts of interest and financial statements and everything like that. And then you're also prepping the nominees for their hearing. You help them prepare for that. And that's something called a murder board. Oh. And it sounds a little bit more intimidating than it is, but it can be intimidating.
Sherpas and murder boards. Yeah, sounds like Agatha Christie. Like
it has its own language, but
it's Washington D.C. Of course, there's murder boards. You know.
Of course.
Don't worry, Epstein's coming.
Yeah. We couldn't just say practice hearing. We had to make it sound like really self-important.
Yeah, right.
So we say murder board.
Yeah.
But it's just a practice hearing, and you have people standing in for the senators, peppering the nominee, getting them comfortable, because a lot of these nominees, some of them are professionals in this environment, but I've been working a lot with the HHS sub-cabinet, which is the director of NIH, or nominees to lead the NIH, FDA, CMS. They're not people that are creatures of Washington. And so they actually do need to get used to the process, used to the lingo, used to the pace of the town and how people are going to come at them. And as Sherpas, we're always assessing their strengths and their weaknesses, their vulnerabilities, and we're working with them to help this process go smoothly. So all of that happens before they even get to their committee hearing. And so then you have the committee hearing where the nominee obviously sits before the committee. They get peppered with all these questions. Then after the hearing, senators get to submit more questions.
Oh my gosh.
They're called questions for the record, and they're written questions from each senator that the nominee has to respond to. And all of this is public. And so I was on the Kennedy Sherpa team. Kennedy got 1,600 questions for the record.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
My goodness.
What?
So all of those have to be.
And they're not just the obvious ones, too. I try to tell people it's not just the abortion stuff, which everyone knew about, but it's also like there's the senators from the Dakotas, like, what are you going to do for big agri? Because that was a big deal for them, agriculture.
Right. Yes, exactly. So there's a lot that goes into this process, and senators care about things that, impact their states or issues that they're very passionate about. All of this stuff comes out. The nominee has to be prepared to respond to it. So there's a lot of preparation and response that goes into that. Once those QFRs are then, we call them QFRs, questions for the record, submitted back to the committee, at that point, the committee can vote on the nomination. And so once the committee then votes, the nomination is considered reported out of committee, and then it goes onto the executive calendar to be considered by the full Senate at a future date. So that is an extensive process, as you can imagine. And it's ongoing. The cabinet, I think, is largely confirmed at this point. We're just waiting on a couple more to go through on the Senate floor. But the sub-cabinet is an immense amount of work. And this will be ongoing through the spring. This process is going to, it takes a long time. Yeah, exactly. The nominees will continue to be confirmed, probably, through the summer. And it's just a process of, the Senate taking a long time. And the nominees have to get sign off from the Office of Government Ethics. Like there's just a lot of things that are ongoing. So it hasn't been boring, I will tell you that.
Well, and personnel is policy, so it does matter so much. That's an incredible story. It does sound like Sherpa is the right word, because you kind of are climbing Mount Everest there. That's amazing amount of effort going in. Well, thank you for all your work there on the Hill. I did promise the people that we would get into the Epstein saga, because this seems to be the story of the week, right? So on Thursday, so yesterday, it was only yesterday, so long ago, the first phase of the Jeffrey Epstein files were going to be put out there, and there was all this hype, and there were these very dramatic binders that were handed to a group of conservative influencers. I think we have a picture of some of them exiting the White House. Yeah, there they are with the binder, and it's ominously titled Epstein Files Phase 1. The problem is that once they opened the binder, it turns out that all we actually had were a few more of the flight logs, all of which, or 99% of which was already public record. There were some more blacked out, lots of black bars going on. So all the happy faces turned very sullen very, very quickly. Um, and so now Pam Bondi comes out with this kind of astonishing letter to Kash Patel saying, okay, before you were in office, I requested these files, and the FBI. I've had a source in the New York FBI saying that thousands of pages are still being withheld from the Department of Justice. We still don't know what went on with the Epstein files. And at this point, Mercer, Rachel, are there even any files left? What are we? We're hopefully getting some today. She's promised heads will roll if they don't come out today. People are starting to attack her for also being in on the Epstein conspiracy. What the heck is going on? Anyone? Can you help us?
I mean, look, at least at the first beginnings, I don't anticipate getting a lot of stuff because they've got, I suppose, there might be people on this list that might anger foreign governments or whatever. So maybe they have to take care of some of that. But in general, I'm just dubious that, or skeptical at least, that we're going to get much information, like that we're going to find out all this information. I mean, like if you're Bill Clinton, who presumably we think went to Epstein's Island like numerous times, you know a lot of powerful people, and you're going to pull on every string you have to make sure your information never comes out. So people wonder why won't they release the files? Because there's going to be a lot of people in the swamp that are going to try to do everything they can to stop it. So even if you have the attorney general and the head of the FBI, I think they're going to find ways to bury this information. I mean, I don't know. I'm very
Rachel,
skeptical.
do you think it was foolish for the Trump administration to even make this promise that we're going to expose everything?
No, I think two things about this. I think Josh is right. I'm sort of have a black pill take on this to some extent. I don't think I don't think the files still exist. Right. I think that if they do exist, I think there are efforts within the government to suppress that information, and they will go to lengths to do it. I think they were probably like shredded or burned right before, all this, when they knew Trump was coming in. But the second point here that I think is really important is this effort of radical transparency. And you're seeing this become a theme of the Trump administration, not just in the executive office, but also, like Bobby Kennedy has said this at HHS, we want radical transparency across the government. In my mind, this is the only way that you restore trust in the government, right? I think we have had so many instances from, COVID on down. You can name them going back my whole life, right? Iraq war, everything. We've seen just massive lies from our government,
right?
And or being told, oh, trust us, and then it comes out 6 months later that whatever they were saying trust us about was either completely fabricated or made up, right? Anthony, I'm thinking in particular of Anthony Fauci and the noble lie. Oh, well, I had to tell people so they would do what I want, even though this wasn't true. The only way that you get back to people trusting their government and actually having faith in what's being said to them is that you have to throw open the books. You have to show people what's actually there. And if there is nothing there, you have to make them believe that you're giving them the best effort possible. And if that's what the Trump administration is trying to do here, I totally support it. As much access as you can give people, that's our right. All of this stuff was done in our name, by the way. Right? All of this stuff. Oh, it's for the common good. It's for the good of the taxpayer. It's done with my money. It's done in my name. I want to see the results. Open the books.
I like it. Let's do it. Let's open those books. Yeah. And I was trying to think of this in terms of like the whole Epstein machine. And of course, like, did he really kill himself? It's a meme now at this point, right? Josh, you often like to say the purpose of the system is what it does. And I think, like, touching on Rachel's point there, the purpose of the Epstein machine was to obfuscate and hide and allow that sort of like deep state backroom thing to happen. And it's continuing to do that, even in hopefully its death throes.
Well, I mean, what is the allegation here? What is the allegation? The allegation is that powerful men, flew to an island
In the Caribbean, right?
offshore, and they had, inappropriate relationship with minors, which is an ungodly sin, absolutely immoral. And you think to yourself, if they would do that, would they hide documents? Would they shred documents? Yeah, obviously they would have no problem. And if someone was, captured, would they have him murdered? like Epstein. Yeah. So I mean, that's why everyone just believes he didn't kill himself. Like, there's too many powerful people who would have an interest in making sure he was no longer breathing. I mean, that's what this amounts to. It's like, the cover up is still nowhere as mean and horrible as the crime itself. That powerful men would fly to this island and do unspeakable things. That's why we want to know who they are. That's why we'd like to know who they are, so we could say these people need to go.
We also need, I think, this kind of understanding that, because people believe that our government exists to protect the powerful, right? That is the crux of this Epstein case, I think, is what upsets people so
much.
And
of the Trump movement, right?
Right, is that the self-licking ice cream cone that is Washington, D.C. will sacrifice everyone and everything to protect itself, to ensure that its friends. And so this idea, even if we find that there's nothing there, this exercise, I think, is really important, because you have to help people believe in the system again. You have to help people believe that in America, accountability is for everyone, and it's not lawfare, right? Because what we're dealing with here is an actual evidence of a crime. Right. And that the system isn't going to protect those people. The system is going to hold them accountable. So if radical transparency is how we restore faith in that, I'm for it all across the government.
See, that one of the biggest mistakes that people made, like the whole Tea Party thing, they thought it was going to be some sort of free market, limited government, libertarian outcry. And it may have had some sounds of it, but that's not really what it was. It came from this idea that we're bailing out these billion-dollar corporations, and then we're also going to just bail out people's mortgages. And people are like, this is not the American system. The common person, like our government is, as you say, it appears that it's now beholden to the connected and the powerful. And why are we bailing out these billionaires? So that has been the fuel for the populism of the 21st century. And if our enlightened elites want to remain in power, then just kind of get with the program a little bit, throw a little bit of this transparency open, regain the trust of the American people, because it's the alternative is not good for them.
Not at all. Well, speaking of trying to restore trust in institutions, Jeff Bezos over at the Washington Post, this story dropped while Josh and I were on recording Wednesday. So I was excited to really dig into this. One of our favorite themes, trust in media. The Washington Post, is it going red? So on Wednesday, Bezos sent I know. Well, hey, I'm going to get there. Let me set you up, Josh. Let me set you up. So he sends this letter. This was an X post. I'm going to throw that up there, Simon. That would be great. He says, I'm writing to let you know, this was to his whole team. Really, this is aimed at the editorial team, about a change coming to our opinion pages. And this is the former home of Jen Rubin, right? So this is the Washington Post opinion. We are going to be writing every day in support and defense of two pillars: personal liberties and free markets. We will cover other topics too, of course, but viewpoints opposing those pillars will be left to be published by others. And then he goes sort of, little nostalgia. There's a time when a newspaper, especially one that was a local monopoly, might have seen it as a service to bring to the reader's doorstep a broad-based opinion section that sought to cover all views. Today, the internet does that job. He talks about his pride in being America. Freedom is ethical. It drives creativity, invention, prosperity. Hence his new emphasis for his paper on free market and personal liberty. This was not taken well by David Shipley, who was formerly the head of the editorial page at the New York Post. According to reports, people who say they know, at an hour-long meeting with the Washington Post opinion section, David Shipley told Bezos, he says that he argued against Bezos' new vision. He said he wanted a broader pluralistic space, and said, which is just so funny. Where's the self-awareness? Bezos sought a focused opinion report, and apparently Bezos said to him, if you're not going to give me a hell yes, then you're giving me a no. And Shipley's like, it's a no, and he left. People are like, oh my gosh, the Washington Post is losing its pluralistic base, or its genius opinion editor. So, of course, Bezos is getting flack for being a Trump lover, for making WashPo a MAGA propagandist rag. Josh, is the Washington Post going red?
Well, obviously, that's not the case at all. I mean, what they're going to do, he said he's going to be dedicated to free markets and so he's going to attack, Trump on tariffs. Probably go after, Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders on some of their, communism and stuff like that. But it's going to end up being basically, Cato Institute libertarian viewpoint. Okay. But like personal liberties, I mean, this is the guy that wouldn't let people buy Ryan Anderson's book on his website for 4 years. I mean, give me a break.
I
on
ordered my
personal
copy
liberties.
off of Amazon, by the way. I just want shout out Ryan Anderson.
After they finally lifted it, right? Because it was like 2 weeks ago they lifted the ban on Ryan Anderson's book on trans. So, but I mean, just you understand like how like the it's not like he's saying we're going to make it MAGA, No, he's going to make it libertarian, which is actually, I'm sorry to my libertarian friends, but like it's the least popular political philosophy in America. Like you look at the quadrant, like there's no one there. But it's decidedly different than the sort of left liberalism that the Post has been for the last 100 years or whatever. And boy, they're taking it well. So Philip Bump,
great name,
writes for the Washington Post. He tweeted out, "What the actual beep?" And like people are like, I'm canceling my subscription. Oh, you go, girl. Truth to power. I'm so proud of you guys. I mean, it's hilarious to me. I mean, it actually is nice though to have something distinct, like different.
Yeah.
I mean, like, why does every major metropolitan newspaper have to try to pretend that they're the New York Times? And the Washington Post has always been like jealous of the New York Times and try to say, no, we're more important. It's like, here's one way you can be different by being different.
Fancy that.
Actually publish something interesting and new. So, and to the extent that they would, come to the Trump administration and criticize him on economic policy from a free market perspective, I welcome that. I mean, tariffs are a form of taxation. Are they any better or worse than income taxes? Like, to me, income taxes are horrendous. It's like, what? So,
right. And I mean, the Washington
welcome it.
Post saw a massive drop off in readership when they refused to endorse Kamala Harris last fall. And a lot of people are saying, well, this is just Bezos trying to save the paper. Do you think that's what's going on, Rachel? Can he save the Washington Post with this move?
People were like, why is this happening? I think Jeff Bezos must have just picked up the Washington Post and read it.
Yeah.
And was like, what is this? Because this idea, and like everybody losing their minds, like, oh, no plurality. Like, have you read the Washington Post opinion page? It is literally blue anon. It is just like Trump screeds every single day. It's the same stuff over and over and over. So just as a business proposition, they were obviously trying to lean into that space. And maybe Bezos was like, there's a big wide world out there. Maybe we'll see what other people think.
He is a businessman.
Yeah, and I do think this is an effort to actually change the direction of the paper, broaden the audience base, because the problem we have at the New York Times, Washington Post has this problem. It's all subscription model at this point. The only people subscribing to this are an increasingly smaller and shriller suburban base that just is incredibly, like, their motivating life force is anti-MAGA, anti-Trump. And you can't run a national paper with that. Like, you could probably run some niche outlets at that, but you can't make money off the space anymore, especially because they're puritanical, right? Their threshold for acceptable behavior is higher and higher and higher. And you're
so
just
ironic.
Right. They're going to like unsubscribe and protest until there's no more subscribers. So I do think, I mean, my best guess, is that he read the Washington Post, was like, oh my gosh, I own a garbage newspaper. I must fix this. And he's trying to, like, I agree. I don't expect a lot of, incredible, high-minded thoughts. Although I will say my spin-off take on libertarianism in a lot of ways, as someone who formerly worked for Rand Paul, is that libertarianism, I support it as a starter pack to conservatism, right? So young libertarians to me, young libertarians are just future conservatives. So I welcome them into my fold.
We welcome you into our fold.
Yeah.
It could be too that, I mean, this is the same editorial pages that, like, last month, their editorial cartoonist was arrested on child pornography charges.
I forgot that. That's a great point. Let's
clean it out. Start something new.
Maybe it's time
Bezos
for change.
Is like, there's more than one problem I have here.
Yeah. Here's a way to fix it. I'll say I'm going for personal liberty. That'll just clear out the house. This is quick fix. And I did want to just, continuing our looking at the media. Speaking of whoops reporting, we had more confirmation that, in fact, the Canada mass graves of Indigenous children were a hoax. That came out this week. Obviously, we've covered this before. It kind of got new life breathed into it this week when more outlets picked it up in Canada. Canada's obviously looking at Trudeau exiting the leadership, and so the story came up again. But again, Canada's Indigenous mass graves narrative was a hoax. And of course, the Washington Post, New York Times, uh, all of these outlets were highly responsible for the outrage non-story um, that this non-story sparked. So we are $214 million spent searching for the graves, which were never found. 110 churches vandalized, and by vandalized, I mean like burned to the ground in Canada. 0 bodies found. Trudeau's government has finally decided, they announced this week, they are shutting down all their funding searching for the mass graves. And I think this story is such a encapsulation of the weaponization of mass media against people of faith, against the Catholic Church directly in Canada, but also against national patriotism itself. I mean, the Canadian children and American children have been taught with stories like this, with hoaxes like this, that you belong to an evil white supremacist colonizers, your history is crap, you should be ashamed of yourselves. And all of this narrative has been just picked up by outlets like the Washington Post and the New York Times. And so, I guess my biggest anger is no one's ever going to really be held responsible for the damage that was done here. And so, absolutely, if we need to burn the Washington Post down, Jeff, and rebuild something where this won't happen, more
Yeah, I
power to
mean,
you.
I think there's so many problems in American life today. You're right, a lack of patriotism. I think a lot of it boils down to what I like. I'm not the first person to give it this term, Selma envy. People who just look at the March on Washington and the March on Selma, and they just so wish that they could be in that
Be
photo
there.
and being brave and be like the first ones to say, "How dare you be racist against blacks and segregation and all that stuff." And so there's that desire to be that, and so that when the gays come along as a so-called civil rights movement, with Stonewall and all this stuff, people are like, I want to show how I don't care who you want to have sex with. I'm just as much of a freedom fighter as they were, at Edmund Pettus Bridge. You're like, it's not really the same, but okay. And then that's what fuels it for the trans. And then we hear about all these indigenous that were harmed by religion, and so many people, because of the sexual revolution, have turned against the Christian religion of their parents and grandparents. This is just an opportunity to make them feel kind of guilt free about leaving the faith of their grandfathers.
Hmm.
But then also to, like, that same kind of, like I said, Selma envy. They get to be the first ones to show how virtuous they are in condemning this evil that was done against indigenous peoples. But the problem is, just like in our current racism stuff, there's more of a demand to conquer racism than there is racism in this country. And in the same way, there's this a stronger desire today to fight injustice and to be seen as fighting injustice than there is
Right.
injustice. Not that we live in a perfect world, certainly not, but that the idea that there'd be mass graves, that Christian churches had just slaughtered indigenous people, was actually
Kind of
sadly
scintillating.
sadly considered welcoming news for people, because they could say,
Right.
I get to be loud and condemn it and show how virtuous I am. And it's just like, to me, give me a break. Like, let's find out if it really happened. And like, really,
Mhm.
like, thousands and thousands of children were just in mass graves, and like no one knew about it till like last Tuesday. Does this
Mhm.
even sound reasonable? Like, come on, people. And then they would do the scans underneath the earth, and they're like, no, there was not mass graves at all. It was all just a hoax. It was all just a way to weaponize against the faith. And you're right. We got 110 churches vandalized, many of them burnt to the ground. No
Mhm.
accountability.
Right.
No,
And
no,
like you
no. Sorry, no, thank you. And I actually am not even mad at Pope Francis. He had that comment. I'm sure a bunch of his advisors said,
he
"This is
took a
fucked
trip.
up."
Yeah.
Yeah. And then he's got to. Then he. I mean, in general, it's best to just kind of take a beat on this stuff. The wisdom of the church is to kind of slow your roll and not try to be too responsive, because it turns out it was all just a bunch of crap.
Mhm. Yeah. Rachel, I don't know if you have any thoughts about the math hoax.
No, I mean, I think this just is a plague of the modern era. And I think it's just the fuel is poured on it by these so-called journalists who, to Josh's point, are willing to unquestioningly accept any premise that aligns with what they want the world to look like, right? They want to live in a world where they are the virtuous white saviors, right? Coming to the aid of all of these so-called, these people that this crime that didn't even exist. But we live in this era where journalists put themselves in the center of the story, right?
Yes.
So they and their crusading actions they are the news. They are the heroes. And that's everything we have to learn from this. Not like, did this actually happen? And, I'm the investigator here. I'm not the main character. Like, everybody's got main character syndrome. I have a whole theory on this, but like social media is the prime example of fomenting this, like, petty narcissism. Right. But it really fuels these hoaxes. And then it's just a self-perpetuating cycle, because we saw this with the Russiagate thing too. You report things that end up not being true, and then you get a Pulitzer for it. And then when it's revealed as false, that Pulitzer is never withdrawn. And so the cycle continues. It rewards this kind of behavior. And so I think as a country, until we start saying we're not accepting this, and the unsubscribe button, and the defunding for these organizations that get political funding happens, like, consequences have to exist, or this is going to continue. But I think it should teach all of us that the first question that you should ask is this true?
Well, actually, I think you made another really good point, Rachel. Of course, you always make great points, but which is the reporters, they love it because it aligns with their own narrative. And so, like, when I talk to my team, we have 7 or so reporters that do lots of great stories here, and I always try to remind them, like, be careful, because sometimes there might be a story that fits with our narrative, and we think, oh, that might be true. It's like, no. We can't fall into the same trap that the other side falls into.
Right.
And I think some people on our side do as well. Like, they want it to
100%.
be true, and social media fuels that. And I'm like, hold on. That story might be too good to be true. Just because it confirms our prior thoughts, you got to hold back on that. Be careful.
No, this is so true. The last thing I'll say, the best book I ever read on this, The Psychology of Decision Making, was Daniel Kahneman's Thinking Fast and Slow, where he talks about this, about confirmation bias, about how our brains want to believe the things that confirm what we already know, right? That is comforting to us as individuals. And we have to, I think, especially if you're in the news business, but I think even more so now as a news consumer, we have to be aware of that dynamic.
Yeah, no, that's really good. Great book recommendation there. If we could drop that in the chat. Everyone always wants more books to read, so because we have
That's a big one.
Love you guys. It's a big a big one. Totally worth it. For sure. Yeah, and I think my theory on the hero of your own story, it's not social media, like, it took off on steroids with social media, but it actually goes back to the Disney princesses. That's a whole nother podcast. Sometime, Rachel, you and I just need to sit down and talk about Disney princess culture and how it destroyed women.
There's that.
You have thoughts on that?
No, I mean, I'm just used to calling him Father. Bishop Barron has the meditations. He does the rosary, and one of them he talks about. I can't remember what Station of the Cross it was. It might have been the Annunciation, where he just talks about we're so consumed in our society on our ego drama, and what's my role? How am I going to make my way through life and all this other stuff? And he asks us all to think like Mary about the theodrama. How am I to understand my God's plan for me? I'm not the star of my own movie and my own show, right? In other words, I willingly should be play my role in God's drama for humanity, and and just to kind of try to get that focus off of the self and to see how I can be of service to our Creator. And so I actually would encourage people to listen to Bishop Barron's Rosary, because he offers these insights on all, and he's so good. I mean, it's just brilliant insight. So
he's amazing. Yeah, my recommendation for the day would be if you're going into Lent and you're looking for something, his meditations on the 7 last words of Christ. He gave these talks at St. Patrick's Cathedral. Gosh, must be about 10 years ago now, but you can still get them on Word on Fire. So 7 Last Words of Christ with Bishop Barron, The Rosary with Bishop Barron, and what's book title again, Rachel? One more time. I think we
Thinking Fast and Slow.
Thinking Fast
got dropped in the chat.
And Slow. Love it. All right. So one more big news story dropping today. No, just kidding. There's millions because it's Trump. But one more we're going to cover. Oh my gosh, he goes so fast. I can't even. But we have an update, Ukraine war. So President Zelensky, we will finally today, hopefully, one, learn how to spell his name, and two, have some kind of minerals deal. Yeah, can I just say how many Y's are in Zelensky? We've got Catholic Vote has 2 Y's, New York Times has 1 Y, and then today I found Reuters has an I and a Y. Like, can we just
I
figure this
personally
out?
put 7
Okay.
Ys.
7 Ys just to
Yeah.
cover your bases.
Zelensky. I just
That's
want to
well,
make sure it's
Rachel,
covered.
you are an overachiever.
One for every $15 million he gets, right?
Yeah, right. Exactly.
It's awesome.
1 for each billion.
Oh man! But Zelensky is on his way to the White House as we speak. The U.S. and Ukraine have, according to officials, agreed to a minerals deal to be signed today. The Ukraine will contribute 50% of future revenues from its natural resources, such as titanium, lithium, and graphite, for all of you chemists in the chat, to a joint reconstruction investment fund, which will be aimed at rebuilding its war-torn economy. Ukraine will gain long-term U.S. economic support. Well, yeah, if we're getting 50% of it, and potential indirect security, no guarantees, through investment protection. And the U.S. secures access to Ukraine's mineral wealth, reducing our reliance on China for some of these resources. That sounds pretty good. A potential return on prior aid, aligning with Trump's transactional approach to foreign policy. So, lots of Ukraine back and forth this week. More accusations that Trump's in bed with Putin, but he's talking a lot to Zelensky for someone who is. We talked a little bit about this, Josh. Are these demands, is this where the direction the United States wants to go in terms of disentangling from the world stage? Are we colonizing Ukraine? What's going on here? And is this a great idea?
I guess he's just trying to get Ukraine to focus on, like, instead of, this war that seems like you're not going to be able to win, is there a way that you can, like, stop the war and start making money? I mean, I guess that's definitely a very Trump way of looking at things. You know, again, my concern was like, well, are we sort of entangling ourselves, long term in Ukraine? But then again, we sort of have been for a while now. So, is it that these assets would never have been, realized if we don't do it? Would China or Russia do it? So is that why we're going ahead with it? I'm not sure, because I doubt Ukraine has the infrastructure to be able to make this happen on their own. But would I rather us be making money with Ukraine on mining than sending them money at a useless war? I guess so.
Yeah, the art of the possible.
I don't know.
Rachel, what's the buzz on Capitol Hill with Ukraine right now?
Well, I have no, obviously, like inside knowledge of anything that's happening, but my read on it is, I don't think it's transactional in just for purely a business deal. The goal of this of the whole thing, right, was to preserve Ukraine's sovereignty. I think everybody agrees that that is a goal that we all have here. One of the best ways to do that is to help Ukraine become strong enough to do that. There's this notion of, are we creating a vassal state of between the U.S. and Ukraine? U.S. investment in any country is a signal to the rest of the world that there is a beginning of a creation of a good business climate here. We are a huge validator for that, for the rest of the world. This is why we spend, billions of dollars in foreign aid trying to invest in these underdeveloped countries for this exact reason. We are lending our credibility and our, to some extent, business acumen and contractual guarantees to Ukraine to start that effort for the Ukrainians. The goal isn't to have us involved there forever, right? So if we can start the process of Ukraine being able to stand on its own 2 feet, and in the process get something in return for the billions we have now sent over there, I don't see a problem here. And I think it's a very hard case to make that this is somehow doing the bidding of Vladimir Putin when we're supporting the government of Ukraine in a way that is helpful to them.
Yeah, and I think too, Zelensky was talking this week about how they want more security guarantees from the United States, and Trump coming back and just saying, look, I expect the other European nations to step up with the defense spending. Like, I really do. That's who should be funding defense, because they're next door neighbors, right? The United States is going to have the business interest there. So I think it'll be it'll be interesting to continue to watch, of course. It's always fun to see the left brains explode a little bit. Oh, there they are.
we
Look at you,
go.
Simon. Thank you. Live at the White.
Yes, I had pretty close. How are you? Pretty
He's really short.
He's all dressed up today.
We were all thinking it.
He's all dressed up today. Oh my
He
gosh.
always shows up. Oh.
That is amazing.
There we go. Well, we'll see how it goes. Another fun meeting that happened this week. Oh, Josh, do you need to head out? Oh, thanks for joining us. He's off to the next big DC event, Mercer. I mean, you're a big deal now.
You know, Franciscan University, they got something going on here. We're trying to expand the beachhead in DC and get college students involved in internships and doing public service. And people think of public service, they don't think enough about, like, hey, you can make a difference working for some of these departments. We don't want all these, congressman's office and all these, departments of the federal government only staffed by left-wing psychos. Let's get some good people in here. So
that's right. Maybe the next Rachel Bovard will come from Franciscan University's new programs.
Hey, anyone who wants to serve in government, I salute you. I'm grateful for your service.
That's awesome. Thank you, Josh. We'll see you on Monday, back in the saddle. All right, Rachel. So let's just go into the Oscar weekend. Someone said that we had to talk about Oscar nominations. I'm not really that interested. I don't know a lot about these films. But I
think you and I might be like the worst people in the world to actually discuss this.
All right, so we're gonna give it a try. So we have Best Picture nominees. I had to look these up, except for Conclave. I do know about Conclave because I'm Catholic. But we have nominees for Best Picture this year. This is coming up on Sunday. Anora, which is apparently about a conflicted and sympathetic Jewish prostitute. Not sure about that. We've got Conclave, of course, which is about the transgender pope. Sorry, spoiler alert, guys. Amelia Perez, which is a transvestite musical profiling the bravery and courage of a convict who knows he's trapped in the wrong body and wants to become a woman. Okay. The Substance, which is about washed up sex stars taking drugs. And of course, Wicked. We've got Wicked as well on there, which is the story of how really evil characters aren't that evil, but actually sympathetic. So, will you be watching the Oscars, Rachel?
Well, now I have a list of movies never to see.
I know.
I haven't seen any of these. I didn't know about them, and now that I know, I've been warned. So
okay, stay away.
But like
they do a Dune Part 2 on there. Dune Part 2 get a nomination, and I did see that, and it was pretty good. It's very beautifully shot.
I was a devotee of Dune as a child, so I feel like maybe I'll try to obviously fit that. The books, yes.
Yeah. Try and see Dune. It was good. Okay, well, so we'll watch the Oscar results for you guys and report back. Maybe we'll just do the fashion on Monday. But yeah, my biggest thing is like skip the Oscars, go out, touch grass with your kids, and don't worry about what Hollywood is doing. The speeches should be fun. Maybe we'll get some good clips. There's always good material. All right, we're going to slide into the Twilight Zone, though. Rachel, did you have anything you wanted to highlight from this week?
Yeah, one thing that caught my eye, this isn't actually like a brand new story for this week, but it's something that's been stuck in my mind since I saw it break about 2 weeks ago. Everybody's been talking about, the DEI executive order and getting DEI out of the government. And there was obviously some recent plane crashes that sparked this conversation of DEI within our transportation organizations. I went down this like rabbit trail. I had no idea how long this effort had been ongoing at the Aviation Administration. There's been a lawsuit filed on behalf of air traffic controllers, and people may be aware of this, but I like went down this rabbit trail of like reading the court filings. Mm-hmm. This effort that started way back in 2013 to essentially rectify what certain groups felt was a racial imbalance in the air traffic controller space. And if, I think we probably all know this, but just to level set, being an air traffic controller is incredibly difficult. I mean, there's it's a highly, not only sort of fraught, like constant motion, but there's a lot of science involved, a lot of math involved. I mean, you really need to be like a highly skilled, dedicated individual capable of managing a lot at once. It's a certain personality type and an aptitude type is essentially what I'm getting. starting in 2013, they started, the FAA under Obama started doing away, or in the air traffic control board basically started doing away with a lot of math requirements and emphasizing instead things like, did you play sports? Did you grow up in an urban environment? Did you have a single mom? And this is a level, I mean, we talk about DEI sometimes at a superficial level, and we think it's sort of stupid and immoral and harmless, but it's really not. And I think that this is what people need to understand. And I'm maybe people already do, but I'm very, very concerned about, like, you're seeing this not only in the air traffic control space, but the medical schools. I mean, there are going to be real life consequences for this absolutely, I would say, unconstitutional and immoral take that just because of the color of your skin, assumptions are made about your aptitude or what, how you should be treated. This is neo-racism, as we know, but I hope this lawsuit is successful and brings this issue to light and begins to rectify what we've seen is now a skills consequence of the DEI agenda. It was just something I literally can't stop thinking about. So
yeah. Well, I mean, I think air travel for everyone is, especially those who do it regularly for work, to realize the rot behind that, and that this is literally real life consequences of ideology just run wild and allowed to influence policy. And yeah, you're talking the safety of people. I was looking back, I was like, okay, did everything just like hit the roof when Trump was took office because all these plane crashes start? No, it's actually been ramping up through the Biden administration. There were untold issues with airplanes and air traffic control and close calls and crashes, and we just didn't hear about them until Trump took office. And like you said, I do hope and pray that this is exposed for what it is, and it's a really insidious nature of it. Also, I was going down the rabbit hole in terms of the military and some of the DEI initiatives that our servicemen and women have been subjected to, and just listening to I was listening to one person on TikTok, and they're like, I was in the military, and we started off with, in 2015 with like once a week there, or once a month, there would be like a party for LGBT, and we would have rainbow flags, and like once a month there's a party. And then by the end of Biden, though, there was like a whole month of these flags, and every week there would be multiple trainings. And you're like, shouldn't they be doing push-ups or something, or like target practice instead? And just the opportunity cost of, we have to spend all this time talking about it, and I think it's like the creating the crisis mentality we were talking about earlier, and it really has affected military readiness, which is
I want my military to be good at one thing, and that is being lethal. That's it.
Yes. Yep.
I don't care. Anything you're doing that is not focused on being a lethal fighting force, I don't care about. And you should stop doing that.
Yeah, absolutely. 100% makes sense to me. But speaking of DEI, my Twilight Zone, I'm going to go with, today is DEI No Spending Day. So Al Sharpton, DEI boycott plan dropped. This has been apparently spearheaded by multiple Democratic leadership, that we are going to take a page from the Bud Light Target boycott book from those conservatives, and we are going to get all of our people to boycott the companies that have caved to Robbie Starbuck and have axed their DEI. So we were told today, we have a 24-hour blackout. Do not make any purchases, period. Do not shop online or in store. No Amazon, no Walmart, no Best Buy. They missed like John Deere, I think. They also need to put that on the list. No McDonald's. Why do you think we should eat at McDonald's? Because they aided and abetted the Trump campaign by giving him the photo op. Right. So anyway, they're going full hog on the boycotting the conservatives today. I wish them well. Apparently too, Starbucks, I got a couple of TikToks about, we can't drink from Starbucks because they're axing the DEI, but yeah, they're going to try and recreate what was done to Bud Light, just reverse engineering on the boycotts. Wish them luck. What was the AP News? Can you click on that one, Simon? Will the 24-hour boycott make a difference? So the People's Union USA calls for 24 hours of spending abstinence. Glad that they're interested in abstinence for a change. This could be really good for them mentally. But they're going to protest these companies. And of course, it's questionable whether this will have any effect. I don't think boycotts in general usually work at this huge corporate level.
Yeah, I was of the same mind, right? And I used to get very annoyed about it because there were some libertarian leaning or libertarians themselves would say, like when we were dealing with Target and the like bathroom issue, right? They would say, "Oh, we all just need to boycott Target." It's like that is impractical in the era of corporate consolidation. It's impossible to actually make an impact on these companies. But I will say I was proven wrong about Bud Light. Right?
Yeah.
The Bud Light boycott when they had that transgender influencer.
Yes. Dylan Mulvaney.
That man, yeah. That worked. And
it did.
And that actually was the most successful boycott I've ever seen. And I think it's terrified like everybody else. So I guess it just depends like how many people get that upset about it to actually.
Well, in Bud Light now, I mean, coming back crawling during the Super Bowl was like the Shane Gillis campaign to just be like, hey, we're regular suburban dads. We like beer. And yeah, it was very effective. It'll be interesting to see if the left can recreate that. I'm guessing that's a no.
Yeah.
But
same.
yeah,
they love their lattes too much.
Oh, yes. I mean, I do love my latte. I'm not going to lie. All right. Well, thank you, Rachel, for being on the show this week. I'm going to anytime. We'll have you on anytime. You just tell us. And good luck with your Sherpa-ing and carrying loads for politicians and nominees going up Mount Everest of confirmation hearings. I wish you luck. I
can see the finish line. So
okay. Let's do it and let's get stuff done. So thank you everyone in the chat for joining us today. We hope that you have a great weekend. We're going to come back Monday with all kinds of ideas for Mardi Gras, beginning of Lent, and whatever else Trump ends up doing over the weekend. It's sure to be a wild ride. If you have not yet done so, please subscribe to us on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. Give us a big thumbs up. We love reviews. We love a good 5-star review. Even a 4-star review I'll settle for, but we really love the 5-star reviews if you like what you hear. But of course, the best way to support us is through prayer. So please join us in prayer, asking Our Lady of Guadalupe, Saint Fidelis, Saint Thomas More, pray for us, and we will see you on